I'm Thomas, this is the RPG Chronicles, and with the introduction of Modiphius' Star Trek Adventures this summer, let's look back on the one that started it all, FASA Star Trek, the role-playing game.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
And you are remembering correctly if you know that I'm new to this game. My friends and I played a version of it, which I've later come to understand wasn't quite the game itself. I've since had an opportunity to spend a little bit more time with the rulebooks and have gotten a better understanding on how the system as a whole works. Over a series of videos, I'd like to introduce this game to players. My biggest problem when I encountered this system was that there were not any tutorials, so we're going to rectify that. In this first video, I'll give a basic overview of gameplay, and in future videos, we'll talk about the different mechanics, combat skills, etc. Just a quick word on the history and source material. FASA Star Trek was initially released in 1982, the same year as Wrath of Khan. As such, the source material is from the original series and the Kirk-era movies. FASA did release 2 supplements for TNG in 1988 and 1989, Officer's Manual and First Year Sourcebook, but according to Wikipedia, Paramount didn't like the direction FASA was taking, and so they got their license pulled. As with most RPGs, the players have characters with attributes and skills in order to perform different tasks and to engage in combat. As FASA Star Trek utilizes a percentile system, the player uses an attribute or skill, or sometimes an average of both, to determine the results of his or her action. The player rolls 2 d10s, or percentile dice, and compares it to the target number given by the Game Master, matching or getting lower than the target results in a success. Rolling low is encouraged in Star Trek. The GM may add modifiers to raise or lower the difficulty of the task in a given circumstance. An example might be when the ship's captain needs to convince the local governor of the planet to allow an away team down to the surface to search for missing crewmen. The situation, though, is complicated because the crewman was lost during a disturbance planet-side in which members of the starship crew had been implicated in the heights of an important artifact. The player would need to use the diplomacy skill. So let's say we're playing with Kirk. He has a 97 in the negotiation diplomacy skill, but because of the accusations made against the crew, the GM has lowered the target number to 30. Luckily for the lost crew member, Kirk also has a charisma of 94. Yes, that's out of 100. Now we know why he always got the ladies. And one other fun fact, Kirk officially has a carousing skill of 62. His extraordinarily high charisma is judged by the GM to grant an extra 10% chance to charm the governor. The player rolling for Kirk's character now needs to roll a 40 or below. If successful, the GM can still order that a member of the planet's security forces accompany the away team because the roll doesn't make the suspicion disappear, but was diplomatically successful to grant the request. But where do all these numbers come from? From your character's United Federation of Planets character data sheet, of course. There's a 9-step process to create a character. Character creation is in some ways more involved than what you might normally expect from another RPG like Pathfinder. The character's backstory and ambitions are necessary in the choice of skills and Starfleet Academy track he or she pursues. At the same time, it really is not possible to create a character without the assistance of the GM, who has knowledge of the other members of the crew. Not everyone gets to go to command school, and some people take a little longer to get to the positions they will hold for the start of the mission. But then more time beforehand also means more opportunities to develop those skills. In fact, skills can improve between each session of the game if the Game Master feels that a character utilized one of his or her skills perfectly. For instance, Ensign Chanel, with her computer technology skill, rolled a 1 in an attempt to purge the system of a virus that was preventing the ship from jumping to warp in the midst of battle. Because she was decisive and quick in her actions and saved the ship using her skills, she can be granted the opportunity to increase her skill level by 2 points or another number the GM deems appropriate. There are no major leveling ups. It happens gradually through the course of each session. The initial skills are a result of your character's personal interests and the Starfleet career path chosen. As the source material is TOS and their movies, it has the human-centric approach of the early incarnation of Star Trek. Most of the major characters are expected to be human. Remember, we probably won't see a Captain Worf until the 24th century. And humans are also baseline in terms of the various major attributes: strengths, endurance, intellect, dexterity, charisma, luck, and psionic potential. As Mr. Spock was non-human, it is possible to play a character of a different race in the core rulebooks. There are some racial modifiers to allow an individual to play an Andoran, Caton, Edoan, Tellarite, or Vulcan. And particularly with Vulcan characters, there are special psionic abilities, and the most important, the Vulcan nerve pinch.
the hell are you doing?
The Vulcan neck pinch?
Oh, no, stupid. You got it much too high. It's down here where the shoulder meets the neck.
Like this?
Yeah!
Player characters are expected to be members of Federation races, though later source books did provide stats for Klingons, Romulans, and a few other species. Of the attributes, endurance is the one that determines the amount of activity and health a PC can perform. FASA Star Trek utilizes this number to determine how much energy you have, which can be lower due to exertion or wounds sustained in combat. They each heal at different rates as well. And when a player drops to 20, the PC can no longer perform actions easily and can sustain damage more, exertion or wound damage attempting easy tasks. And when the number drops to 5, you're unconscious. Since combat was mentioned, it would be good to move on to there. There are two types of combat: hand-to-hand, which does cover phasers and disruptors, and space combat. The space combat can be as easy or as complicated as the players and GM want to make it. There's a separate book, Star Trek Starship Tactical Combat Simulator, that can be played completely on its own, that is included as one of the core rulebooks for the Star Trek RPG. The combat simulator describes 3 levels of play. There's basic, advanced, and graduate. For most new FASA Star Trek players, they will probably decide to go with the basic rules that rely on tactical decisions and proper power allocation and management and good dice rolling. Even in the simplified version, players have access to both phasers and torpedoes, and need to watch out for hull breaches and loss of engines. One quick criticism, though. Despite being post-Wrath of Khan,
he's intelligent, but not experienced. This pattern indicates two-dimensional thinking.
The combat simulator is only two-dimensional. As you move into higher levels of play in the combat simulator, players take over more direct control of the ship's resources and combat station. The source books provide all the data necessary to build your own starship based on TOS specs, but also provides many ready-made ships to take out for a spin. Hand-to-hand combat will feel pretty familiar to most people who have played RPGs in the past. There are a variety of weapons from which to choose. Again, proficiency in the style of weapon is important. The rules allow for a general proficiency for typical Star Trek weapons, but there's a whole section on more primitive weapons like a sword, a bow, or a pistol, which require their own proficiencies, as well as hand-to-hand combat. In addition, there are standard modifiers to add based on a variety of different circumstances. The most common is the firing of phasers. The distance affects your ability to accurately use them. For instance, if Lieutenant Samar, who is a member of security and probably a red shirt,
a Klingon! Grant, no!
is 9 to 15 meters. Yep, we're dealing with metric here. 9 to 15 meters from his target, he has a negative 15 modifier to hit, plus any other modifiers that might be applied, such as the target kneeling behind a console, negative 5. His endurance is 59, and his proficiency in marksmanship modern weapons is a 63. So his possibility to hit is 59 endurance, plus 63 marksmanship skill, with the total divided by 2, 61. Then from 61, subtract 15 for the distance modifier and 5 for the position modifier. Lieutenant Samar's player needs to roll a 41 or lower, but spending some action points to aim first can add back those lost 5 for your opponent's cover. It's important to remember that 23rd century weapons are extremely powerful. A non-stun setting on a Class 1 phaser, 40 points of wound damage, can lower most PCs to below 20 wound damage on their current operational endurance, which places an extreme limitation on the PC's ability to act. Romulan Disruptor, 75 wound damage, will kill all Federation PCs with a hit. Even a graze with these weapons can do tremendous damage. Two other peculiar components concerning actions on combat are action points and play sequence, what is often referred to in other systems as initiative. Every player has a set number of action points to spend each round, which is determined based on the PC's endurance. The formula is endurance divided by 10, rounded down, and then add 4. To use a well-known character, Mr. Spock has an endurance of 82, and as a result has 12 action points every round. Those points are used to move, perform scans, fix components, engage in combat, or respond to combat. All actions have a set value, and when a player uses all their PC's action points, he or she can no longer react to anything until the next round. Players must judge whether they want to hold some of their action points until later to react to the actions of someone else. Commander Lenal cannot impede the Klingon running in front of her if she no longer has any action points remaining to use. The play sequence is more of a freeform system. The game master decides which side, the players or the NPCs, act first. The GM's judgment should be based on the given situation. Once the decision is made, turns pass back and forth between sides until the end of the round. The order in each side is determined by the players for the PCs and the GM for the NPCs, and it can change, but always alternating back and forth. Granted, there's a lot of skills, and sometimes the math is just a bit odd, but it is a well thought out and deep game going back to the original Star Trek. If that's your favorite era, or are looking for a retro experience, FASA Star Trek, the role-playing game, might just be one to add to your game nights. I've only touched the surface of the rules, though, in order to provide the bare basics to gameplay. In the next video, I'll go more in depth into understanding the attributes and all of the skills. And so until next time, keep that chirpy gnome away from your dice.